I had an incredible opportunity to get hands-on with some historical books out of the collection of the Remnant Trust. In case you've never heard of the Remnant Trust, it is a public educational foundation now based here in Indianapolis, Indiana. Over the past couple of decades, the Trust has amassed a significant and growing collection of original books and manuscripts related to the themes of individual liberty and human dignity. The Remnant Trust operates out of this building, the Columbia Club on Monument Circle in Indianapolis. It is a historic and distinguished club that was founded in 1889 just after the campaign and election of Indianapolis's President Benjamin Harrison. It is still a private club and hotel with some fascinating artifacts and rare art on display inside. If you would like to see and learn more about that, then check out my separate video featuring the Columbia Club linked in the description. But the Remnant Trust now has a select display of their books here at the Columbia Club, so that's what I've come to see.
So the Remnant Trust was founded back in 1997 by a man named Brian Becks. It was founded in Hagerstown, Indiana. And basically Brian started this collection with the values of individual liberty and human dignity in mind. He made a list of 100 books that he felt represented that throughout human history, and he was set out to get all of those 100, and that's how the organization began. Funny story, before they even got to those original 100, there was actually 1,200 works they ended up collecting before they even got there. So it expands to 1,600 works now. As mentioned earlier, the core values of the mission would be individual liberty or human dignity. So we try and take these works and take them around, move them to exhibits, and show these to people and let them hold them in their hands and kind of be a part of history. So usually there's a lot of hesitancy there, like, oh, you can actually touch these. So yeah, that's a big part of our organization. It started back in 1997. It moved around a lot to different institutions, different universities, and then it found a home in Lubbock, Texas. It was down at Texas Tech for 8 years. But recently, back in 2022, it came back home to Indiana. So we now have offices and a second floor exhibit space here at the Columbia Club, where this video is being filmed today. And then we have a permanent exhibit space and where the rest of the 1,600 work collection is housed. That's over at the Indiana Historical Society, also in downtown Indianapolis.
I really appreciate their methodology of allowing anyone to just page through these books without even wearing gloves. Few organizations would just allow me to handle a 500-year-old book like this. As mentioned, most of the Remnant Trust holdings are stored at the Indiana Historical Society, where a new permanent exhibit featuring the Trust collection is in development and scheduled to open in the fall of 2024. Many of these are extremely rare first editions from the years of publication, which is pretty awesome. The Remnant Trust separates the historical timeline into 3 ages. Age 1 covers a long time span from ancient cuneiform to the Magna Carta in 1215, then Age 2 from the time of King Henry II to the precipice of the American Revolution, then the modern Age 3 from the late 18th century to the present. By the way, it is possible to arrange a tour with them to get to see the Columbia Club exhibit yourself. They are planning on significantly expanding the display here at the Columbia Club in the near future, so definitely schedule a tour to check it out if you are interested. They will also bring out carefully curated selections to traveling events. For example, I saw them at Wabash College for their Frederick Douglass display, which featured this first edition of Douglass's autobiography, My Bondage and My Freedom, as well as his authentic signature, and one of the first public printings of the Emancipation Proclamation from 1862. As I show off these antique books authored by some of history's most influential thinkers, I will point out some highlights from this grouping. Ancient philosophies are well represented in the Remnant Trust collection. For example, this is a 400-year-old first English edition of Aristotle's Politique, printed in London in 1598. In this text, Aristotle considered an idealism in government to promote virtuous citizenry, as well as other ideas that are still discussed over 2,000 years after it was written. Aristotle's Politics is foundational to Western political theory. This is a 1687 facsimile of the Magna Carta, which was actually printed in the colony of Pennsylvania by William Bradford, who established the first printing presses in Philadelphia and New York City. So this is technically among the first ever copies of the Magna Carta printed in the American colonies. This is the oldest book that I have probably ever handled, a first edition of Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica from 1475. This book is over 500 years old and I got to go through it with my bare hands. This book has some fantastic illuminated initials. Here is a 1610 edition of the City of God, which was written in Latin by St. Augustine of Hippo in the 5th century AD. In this text, he laid out his concept of the City of God, which is predestined for those who will receive salvation, and the earthly city of man for those who get eternal damnation. The decorated lettering throughout this book is remarkable. One of the most interesting books is The Praise of Folly, written by the humanist Desiderius Erasmus in the early 16th century. This 1549 book contains woodcut title page borders, as well as excellent illustrations which really enhance this satirical piece, which was quite popular amidst the Northern Renaissance. This one is just remarkable. A 1651 printing of Leviathan by Thomas Hobbes. This famous text supports strong centralized government and social contracts, which are exhibited in that iconic engraving. This is Abraham Bossie's frontispiece of the Leviathan, in which the singular sovereign emerges from the mountain and himself protects the state with secular and ecclesiastical ideals. Hobbes wrote this during the English Civil War, so in the book he argues that the Leviathan is necessary to prevent endless war against all in a state of nature. Of course, in the Bible, the Leviathan was a deadly sea serpent, so he was not holding back with this metaphor. This here is a first edition compilation of the Federalist Papers from 1788, which showcases the anonymously published essays written in support of the proposed Constitution in New York newspapers to garner support. These were written by John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton, who wrote under the pseudonym Publius. While Common Sense is much more well known, Thomas Paine wrote The American Crisis later the same year in 1776, urging the necessity to pick up arms and support independence from Britain. This edition of the pamphlet is from 1819, and the book has a bit of a unique appearance. These are 1841 editions of the 2-volume Democracy in America, a series of influential reflections on American democracy written by Alexis de Tocqueville. Throughout 1831, Tocqueville traveled around the young nation, and this 1841 text has an original fold-out map of the United States experienced by Tocqueville, which is amazing. The aristocrat from Normandy had been sent by the French government to study the American prison system. However, he ended up writing this absolutely fascinating reflection on America's democratic experiment, what he saw as the successes and shortcomings of equality there. Here's an 1860 compilation of the crucial debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas during the Illinois senatorial election of 1858. This text documents their rivaling ideologies in an aggravated nation as they came head-to-head again for the presidential race of 1860. All 7 debates were transcribed in this book, which would have served as an important source for the voting public in that tumultuous presidential election. There were some other classic texts authored by figures such as Plato, Marcus Aurelius, John Locke, Adam Smith, and John Stuart Mill featured in this display as well. The Remnant Trust used to be based out of the historic Carnegie Library in Jeffersonville, Indiana, just across the Ohio River from Louisville, Kentucky. Outside the old library, the Remnant Trust commissioned an impressive monument known as the Timeline of Liberty, sculpted by Lorenzo E. Giglieri in the early 2000s. It is composed of a series of 3 large bas-reliefs representing the 3 distinct historical ages that the Trust uses for interpretation. Unfortunately, the reliefs were not lit up at night when I visited, but it is a really impressive monument referencing important writers, philosophers, and orators who have championed the values of liberty over the past several thousand years. If you happen to be in the Louisville area, come check out the Timeline of Liberty at Warder Park. There's also an epic statue of Thomas Jefferson in his namesake city. So I want to give a big thanks to the Remnant Trust for having me and letting me check out these books. I definitely look forward to seeing what they do in the future. Again, they are planning on accelerating their exhibits and public engagement in the Indianapolis area, so make sure to check out their exhibits and events. More information can be found on their website, www.remnanttrust.org. You can also learn more by following their social media. They regularly post features on TikTok and YouTube. You can see all those links in the video description. Also, please consider subscribing to Hoosier Tours for more history and travel content around the United States and Europe. Thanks for watching!